Welcome to another journey through the quiet corridors of history. Tonight we explore the repetitive, methodical world of medieval court entertainers. These performers lived lives of routine and discipline, following the same patterns day after day, season after season, year after year. In the grand halls of medieval castles where stone walls absorbed sound and time seemed to move slowly, court entertainers began each day before dawn. The morning routine was always the same, always predictable, always methodical. The entertainers would wake in their shared quarters, simple rooms with straw mattresses and rough woolen blankets. The quarters were located in the lower levels of the castle, away from the noble chambers but close enough to be summoned quickly. These rooms were modest, containing only the most basic necessities: a wooden chest for belongings, a small table, perhaps a single chair. Each morning began with the same ritual of dressing. The entertainers would don their everyday clothing, not yet the colourful costumes of performance. Simple tunics of brown or grey wool, hose that had been mended many times, soft leather shoes that made little sound on the stone floors. The first task of every day was the care of their instruments and equipment. This was not glamorous work, but essential maintenance that consumed much of their time. Lute strings needed checking for wear and proper tension. The wood of instruments required attention to prevent cracking in the castle's varying humidity. Juggling balls and other props had to be examined for damage that might cause embarrassment during performance. The minstrel would carefully tune his lute, turning each peg with practiced precision. The same notes, played in the same order, every single morning. First the lowest string, then working upward. Each string plucked individually, then in simple combinations. This process took time, methodical time, as he listened carefully to each tone and adjusted accordingly. The acrobat would stretch in the same sequence every morning. First the fingers and wrists circling slowly, then the arms, reaching overhead and to each side, the neck rolling gently from side to side, the back bending forward and backward with careful control, the legs lifting each knee and rotating each ankle. This stretching routine never varied, performed in the same order, at the same pace, every single day. The juggler would practice basic patterns with worn leather balls. 3 balls in a simple cascade thrown to the same height, caught at the same point, over and over. The same arc, the same timing, the same gentle thud as each ball landed in his palm. This was not practice for improvement, but maintenance of existing skill. The repetitive motion was soothing, predictable, requiring little conscious thought. The storyteller would recite passages from memory, speaking softly to avoid disturbing others in the quarters. The same tales, told in the same words, with the same cadence. These stories have been polished through countless tellings until every word was fixed in place. King Arthur's knights, tales of courtly love, religious parables approved by the church. The words flowed automatically, like water following a familiar channel. After this morning preparation, the entertainers would make their way to the great hall for the first meal of the day. The walk through the castle corridors was always the same route, past the guards who nodded in recognition but rarely spoke, up the stone steps worn smooth by countless feet, through the heavy wooden doors that required both hands to open. In the great hall, the entertainers sat at their designated table, always the same seats, always the same companions. They were above the servants but below the minor nobles, positioned precisely according to their place in the castle hierarchy. This seating arrangement never changed, providing a comforting predictability to each meal. The morning meal was simple and consistent. bread, often day-old but still edible, small beer, watered down but safer than water, sometimes porridge made from whatever grains were available, occasionally cheese or dried fruit. The entertainers ate quietly, conserving their voices for the day's performances. After breaking their fast, the entertainers would spend the morning hours in practice and preparation. This was solitary work, each performer focusing on their particular skills. They would find quiet spaces throughout the castle where they could work without disturbing others. The minstrel might position himself in an alcove where the acoustics were favourable. He would play scales and arpeggios, the same musical exercises he had performed for years. His fingers moved automatically across the strings, muscle memory guiding each note. The melodies were familiar, comforting in their predictability. He would play the same songs that would be performed that evening, not to learn them anew, but to keep them fresh and polished. The acrobat would find space in a storage room or unused chamber, where the ceiling was high enough for his routines. He would practice handstands against the wall, holding the position for long counted breaths. Rolling exercises across the stone floor, simple tumbling passes that required no equipment, balance work on a narrow beam of wood. Each exercise was performed the same number of times in the same sequence, with the same methodical attention to form. The juggler would work with his various props, starting with the simplest patterns and progressing through his repertoire. 3 balls, then 4, then 5. The same progression every time, clubs replacing balls with their different weight and balance. Scarves that floated more slowly through the air. Each prop required different timing, different hand positions, different visual focus. The practice was meditative, repetitive, requiring concentration that pushed other thoughts from the mind. The storyteller would pace slowly while reciting, working on pacing and emphasis. The same stories but with subtle variations in delivery. A pause here, a change of tone there. These performances had been refined over years, each gesture and inflection carefully crafted. The practice was less about memorization and more about maintaining the smooth flow of narration that would hold an audience's attention. As the morning progressed toward midday, the entertainers would begin preparing for their afternoon duties. These might include providing background entertainment during meals, teaching skills to pages or young nobles, or simply being available should their services be requested. The midday meal followed the same pattern as the morning. The same seats, the same companions, the same quiet conversation. The food might vary slightly with the seasons, but the routine remained constant. Bread and beer were staples, stew or soup, varying in ingredients but similar in preparation. The entertainers ate with the knowledge that their afternoon and evening performances would require energy and concentration. Afternoon activities varied depending on the day of the week and the season, but followed predictable patterns. On some days, the entertainers might be called upon to provide instruction. Young nobles learning to play instruments or pages being taught juggling skills as part of their training in coordination and timing. Teaching required patience and repetition. The same basic lessons delivered to different students, but following the same progression. How to hold a lute properly, fingers positioned just so. How to pluck the strings with the right amount of force. How to coordinate the movements of both hands. These lessons moved slowly, with much repetition and gentle correction. When teaching juggling, the instructor would start with a single ball, throw and catch with the right hand, throw and catch with the left hand, the arc of the throw always the same height, always the same curve. Only after mastering the single ball would students progress to 2 balls, then eventually 3. Each stage required weeks or months of practice, the same motions repeated thousands of times. On days when teaching was not required, the entertainers might spend their afternoon hours in maintenance tasks, mending costumes that had suffered small tears or loose seams, replacing worn strings on instruments, crafting new juggling props to replace those that had become too damaged for use. Costume maintenance was detailed work that required good light and careful attention. Theatrical clothing received hard use and needed constant attention. Seams that had pulled loose during energetic performances. Fabric that had worn thin from repeated washing. Decorative elements that had come unattached and needed to be sewn back in place. The entertainers would work with needle and thread, making small, precise stitches. The work was methodical and somewhat tedious, but necessary to maintain their professional appearance. A torn costume or a missing decoration could distract from a performance and reflect poorly on the entire troupe. Instrument maintenance required different skills, but the same careful attention to detail. Checking for cracks in wood that might worsen if not addressed. Cleaning accumulated dust and grime from surfaces and mechanisms. Replacing strings before they broke during performance, which would be both embarrassing and disruptive. The lute required frequent attention to its strings, which were made of gut and prone to stretching, breaking, and going out of tune. Each string had to be wound carefully around its tuning peg, with enough wraps to hold securely but not so many as to interfere with the peg's function. The bridge and nut required occasional adjustment to maintain proper string height and intonation. As afternoon faded toward evening, the entertainers would begin preparing for their primary duty, providing entertainment during the evening meal and the activities that followed. This preparation followed the same routine every day, a comforting sequence of familiar tasks. First came the change into performance attire. These costumes were more colourful and elaborate than everyday clothing, designed to catch the eye and create a sense of spectacle. The minstrel might don a tunic of bright blue or green, with decorative trim around the sleeves and hem. The acrobat would dress in fitted clothing that allowed freedom of movement while displaying his athletic form. The juggler might wear particoloured hose, one leg red and one leg yellow, according to the traditional garb of his profession. The storyteller's costume was perhaps the most important, as his appearance helped set the tone for his tales. Rich fabrics when available, or at least clean and well-maintained clothing in darker colours that would not distract from his words. Sometimes a hood or hat that could be used as a prop, or a cloak that could be draped dramatically during certain passages. Each performer would check their appearance carefully, ensuring that costumes fit properly and that all fastenings were secure. A wardrobe malfunction during performance would be mortifying and could damage their reputation with the noble audience they served. With costumes prepared, the entertainers would gather their equipment and make their way to the great hall for the evening meal. This was the primary performance time, when the lord and lady of the castle, along with their guests and household, would be assembled for dining and entertainment. The great hall during evening meals was a bustling place, filled with conversation and the sounds of dining. Servants moved between tables carrying platters of food and flagons of wine or ale. Dogs wandered beneath the tables hoping for scraps. The fire in the great hearth cast flickering light and dancing shadows across the stone walls. Into this environment, the entertainers would introduce their performances, carefully calibrated to complement rather than overwhelm the dining experience. Background music during the meal itself, with more elaborate entertainment between courses or after the meal was complete. The minstrel would position himself where his music could be heard throughout the hall without being too loud for conversation. He would play familiar melodies, songs that the diners knew and enjoyed but that did not demand their complete attention. His repertoire included courtly love songs, religious hymns appropriate to the season, and instrumental pieces that provided pleasant background sound. These performances required careful judgment of mood and timing. Too loud, and the music would interfere with conversation and be resented. Too soft, and it would go unnoticed and unappreciated. The minstrel had to read the room constantly, adjusting volume and tempo to match the energy of the dining hall. Between courses, when diners were momentarily free from the business of eating, the acrobat might provide brief exhibitions of skill. Simple tumbling passes that could be completed quickly, handstand work that showed strength and control, balance exercises that demonstrated precision and grace. These performances were designed to amaze without requiring long periods of attention from the audience. The juggler's work during meals was similarly constrained by the need to avoid disrupting the dining experience. Simple patterns with colourful balls or scarves that caught the eye without demanding focused attention. Occasional, more complex routines when the audience was between courses and able to watch more closely. The storyteller's role during meals was typically limited to brief interludes, perhaps sharing short tales or amusing anecdotes that could be easily interrupted if necessary. His primary performance time would come later, after the meal was complete and the audience was ready for more sustained entertainment. After the evening meal concluded, the entertainer's work shifted into its most important phase. With the lord and lady settled in their chairs and the household gathered around, this was the time for the performances that justified the entertainer's presence in the castle. The minstrel would present his finest songs, pieces that told complete stories and showcased his vocal ability as well as his instrumental skill. These might include chansons de geste about heroic knights, courtly love songs that praised the virtues of noble ladies, or religious songs appropriate to the liturgical season. Each song was a complete performance, requiring the audience's attention and rewarding it with skilled artistry. The storyteller would take centre stage for extended narratives, tales that might last for half an hour or more. These were the stories that had been passed down through generations of performers, polished and refined until every word served a purpose. Arthurian legends, tales of Charlemagne and his paladins, stories of saints and martyrs, romances of love and adventure. During these storytelling performances, the hall would grow quiet, with only the crackling of the fire and the occasional cough or whispered comment breaking the silence. The storyteller would use all his skills of voice and gesture to bring the tales to life, varying his tone for different characters, building tension toward climactic moments, providing moments of humour to relieve dramatic intensity. The acrobat and juggler would provide interludes between the longer performances, offering displays of physical skill that provided variety and kept the audience engaged. The acrobat might perform more complex routines than were possible during the meal, using the open space in the centre of the hall for tumbling passes, pyramid building with other performers, or strength demonstrations that drew gasps of appreciation from the watchers. The juggler would present his most challenging patterns, working with 5 or 6 objects simultaneously, or combining juggling with other skills like balancing or dancing. These performances required complete concentration and represented years of dedicated practice distilled into moments of apparent effortless skill. As the evening progressed and the audience began to show signs of weariness, the entertainers would gradually wind down their performances. The stories would become shorter and less complex. The music would become more soothing and less energetic. The physical demonstrations would give way to quieter skills that required less space and created less excitement. The goal was to leave the audience satisfied, but not overstimulated, ready to retire to their chambers with pleasant memories of the evening's entertainment. This required sensitivity to the mood of the room and the ability to adjust performances accordingly. When the lord and lady finally rose to retire, signalling the end of the evening's formal entertainment, the performers would gather their equipment and make their own preparations for a departure from the great hall. Instruments needed to be carefully packed away to protect them from damage. Costumes required immediate attention to address any problems that had developed during the evening's performances. The entertainers would return to their quarters, where the process of removing their performance attire and returning to everyday clothing reversed the preparations of several hours earlier. Costumes would be hung carefully to prevent wrinkling. Any damage discovered during the evening would be noted for repair the following day. In their shared quarters, the entertainers might spend a brief time in quiet conversation, reviewing the evening's performances and noting the audience's reactions. What songs had been most well received? Which stories had held attention most effectively? Had there been any mistakes or problems that needed to be addressed? This professional discussion was typically brief, as the performers were tired from their evening's work. Before sleeping, each entertainer would prepare for the following day, laying out the equipment that would need attention during the morning maintenance routine. The minstrel would note which strings had shown signs of wear during the evening's performance. The acrobat would consider which exercises had felt different or more difficult than usual. The juggler would examine his props for signs of damage or excessive wear. The sleeping arrangements in the entertainers' quarters were simple, but adequate. Each performer had his own sleeping space, typically consisting of a straw mattress on a wooden frame, with woolen blankets for warmth. Privacy was minimal, but the entertainers had learned to coexist peacefully in these close quarters. As they settled into sleep, the entertainers could review a day that had followed the same patterns as countless days before it. The morning maintenance and practice, the afternoon preparation and possible teaching duties, the evening performances in the Great Hall. Each day was similar to the last, providing stability and predictability in lives that might otherwise have been filled with uncertainty. This routine would continue day after day, with only minor variations for holidays or special occasions. During Advent and Lent, the repertoire would shift to emphasize religious themes. During wedding celebrations or important visits, the performances might be extended or made more elaborate. But the basic pattern remained constant, as reliable as the sunrise and the tolling of the castle's bell. The seasonal changes brought some variety to the entertainers' lives, though even these followed predictable patterns. Winter performances took place entirely indoors, with the great hall warmed by fires and lit by candles and torches. The shorter days meant that evening entertainment began earlier and might last longer, as there were fewer daylight hours for other activities. Winter also brought challenges for instrument maintenance, as the dry air from constant fires could cause wooden instruments to crack. The entertainers had to be particularly vigilant about protecting their equipment, sometimes placing bowls of water near their instruments to maintain adequate humidity. Spring brought the possibility of outdoor performances as the weather warmed, and the castle's inhabitants began to spend more time in courtyards and gardens. These outdoor settings required different skills and different equipment. Voices had to carry farther without the focusing effect of stone walls. Juggling had to account for breezes that might affect the flight of light objects. Summer was perhaps the most active season for entertainers, as the longer days allowed for extended outdoor festivities, and the increased travel by nobles and merchants brought new audiences to the castle. Wedding season brought multiple celebrations, each requiring special performances tailored to the happy couples being honoured. Harvest time in autumn brought its own celebrations, with Thanksgiving festivals and harvest feasts that called for performances emphasising abundance and gratitude. The entertainers' repertoire included songs and stories specifically for these seasonal celebrations, adding variety to their regular performances while maintaining the essential routines that structured their daily lives. Throughout all seasons, the entertainers maintained their daily routines with little variation. Morning maintenance and practice, afternoon preparation and teaching, evening performances. The work was demanding, but provided security and purpose that many people of their social class could not expect. The relationship between the entertainers and the noble household they served was complex but generally stable. They were valued for their skills but were not members of the family or inner circle. They were better fed and housed than common servants, but had less security than craftsmen with more essential skills. The entertainers understood their place in the castle hierarchy and conducted themselves accordingly. They were respectful to all members of the household above their station, polite but not familiar with their peers, and kind to those below them in rank. This social navigation was as much a part of their daily routine as their artistic practice. Interactions with other castle residents followed predictable patterns. The kitchen staff might save choice scraps for entertainers who had provided particularly pleasing performances. Guards who enjoyed music might request specific songs during quiet moments. Pages and young nobles might seek informal lessons or advice about developing their own entertainment skills. These relationships developed slowly over time, built through countless small interactions and maintained through consistent behavior. An entertainer who was reliable, respectful and skilled could expect to enjoy a secure position and friendly relations with the entire castle community. The entertainers also served as a link between the castle and the outside world, as their training and background often included travel and experience with other households. They might bring news of events in other regions, or knowledge of new songs and stories that were becoming popular elsewhere. This role as bearers of news and culture was subtle but important. In an age when information travelled slowly and entertainment options were limited, the entertainers provided both diversion and connection to the broader world beyond the castle walls. The training that had brought the entertainers to their current positions had typically begun in childhood, with years of practice and refinement needed to develop professional-level skills. Many had learned their arts from family members, carrying on traditions that had been passed down through generations. Others had been apprenticed to master performers, learning through years of observation, imitation, and gradual assumption of responsibility. This traditional master-apprentice relationship ensured that skills and repertoire were preserved and transmitted to new generations of entertainers. The daily practice that occupied so much of the entertainers' time was both maintenance of existing skills and gradual refinement of technique. Even master performers continued to learn and improve throughout their careers, adding new songs to their repertoire, developing new juggling patterns, or crafting new stories from traditional materials. This ongoing development was necessary to maintain audience interest and to keep pace with changing tastes and expectations. A performer who relied entirely on a fixed repertoire without adding new material would eventually be perceived as stale and might find his position in jeopardy. The physical demands of the entertainer's work required attention to health and fitness that went beyond their daily practice routines. The acrobat's work was obviously physically demanding, but even the minstrel and storyteller needed to maintain their strength and stamina for long performances. Diet played a role in maintaining performance capability. The entertainers needed adequate nutrition to support their physical and mental demands, but they also had to avoid foods that might interfere with their work. Heavy meals before performances could impair agility or vocal clarity. Certain foods might produce digestive discomfort that would be distracting during shows. Sleep was crucial for memory, coordination, and vocal health. The entertainers typically retired earlier than many castle residents, and rose earlier as well. ensuring adequate rest for their demanding daily routines. Poor sleep could lead to mistakes in performance that would be immediately obvious to their audiences. The entertainers' work also involved considerable emotional labour, as they were expected to present cheerful, engaging personalities, regardless of their personal circumstances or feelings. A performer having a difficult day still needed to deliver entertaining and uplifting performances for his audience. This professional requirement for consistent presentation meant that the entertainers had to develop skills in emotional regulation and performance psychology that complemented their artistic abilities. They learned to separate their personal emotional states from their professional personas, ensuring that audience experience was not compromised by performer difficulties. The repetitive nature of much of their work could be both comforting and challenging. The same daily routines provided stability and security, but they could also become monotonous over time. Skilled entertainers learned to find satisfaction in the gradual refinement of familiar material and in the subtle variations that kept well-known performances fresh. Even within highly structured routines, there was room for creativity and personal expression. A minstrel might experiment with small variations in ornamentation or phrasing. A storyteller might adjust his pacing or emphasis based on audience reaction. A juggler might incorporate new transitions between familiar patterns. These small innovations kept the work interesting for the performers while maintaining the reliability and predictability that audiences expected. The challenge was to balance creativity with consistency, offering something fresh while preserving the essential character of proven material. The entertainers' daily lives were thus a blend of routine and artistry, of repetitive practice and creative expression, of individual skill development and collaborative performance. Each day followed familiar patterns while offering opportunities for refinement and growth. As another day in the life of medieval court entertainers drew to a close, with the great hall growing quiet and the castle settling into nighttime routines, the performers could take satisfaction in work well done and duties faithfully fulfilled. Tomorrow would bring the same patterns, the same opportunities, the same quiet satisfaction of skilled artistry applied to the service of others. The morning maintenance would begin again with the dawn light filtering through narrow windows. The lute strings would be checked and tuned. The juggling balls would be examined for wear. The acrobat would perform his stretching routine. The storyteller would recite his familiar passages. The comfortable, predictable rhythm of professional life would continue as it had for years past, and would for years to come. In this repetition was both the limitation and the liberation of the entertainer's life. Limited by routine and obligation, but liberated from uncertainty and want. Limited by the expectations of others, but liberated to pursue excellence in chosen arts. Limited by social station, but liberated to bring joy and wonder to others through the magic of skilled performance. And so the days continued, one following another in pleasant succession, each bringing the same opportunities for service, skill, and the quiet satisfaction of work well done. The entertainers' lives moved in rhythm with the castle's routines, as predictable as the changing of the guards, and as comforting as the evening fire in the great hearth. This was the daily life of medieval court entertainers, structured, purposeful, and filled with the accumulated wisdom of traditional arts practiced with dedication and skill. Day after day, season after season, year after year, the patterns continued, bringing stability to lives that might otherwise have been marked by uncertainty and want. In the quiet of their shared quarters, as sleep claimed tired bodies and minds, the entertainers could rest in the knowledge that their place in the world was secure, their skills were valued, and tomorrow would bring another opportunity to practice their arts in service of others. The routine would continue, comfortable and reliable as the rising sun,